Welcome back to our Shurim on Daat Elokim, Introduction to the Kabbalah Daat Elokim. Right now we are commencing the Olam, to explain the Olam Ha'akudim. This is the next world. Remember, as we spoke in the last previous classes, we're moving from world to world. Last world we spoke about was called the Olam Ha'ak, which is an abbreviation for Adam Kadmon. That was the first world. Second world we'll be learning about is about the world of Akudim. Akudim. Akud means to bind up all in one. So what we're talking about in short is that, remember, we had the world of Adam Kadmon and the Orot, the lights which come from the Pinimiut of Adam Kadmon are coming out from the Pe Kaviyachal, right? We're not Megashim again, but we just sort of imagine, loosely imagine, that's a better word, loosely imagine that these orot are coming from an orifice, so-called the Peh, and they're all coming out together. And let's start on page Lamed Hey. Hine, orot ele da'akudim betzetam min ha'peh da'ak bilti mushlamim yatzo. Remember, in Kabbalah, we're always talking about, very simply, about two things. Either we're talking about orot or kelim, lights or vessels. That's the only two things. Now, what is really the difference between lights and vessels? Nothing. There's only one difference between them, is that vessels are materialized lights. Orot, which become megashem, become kelim. Okay, is that clear? So there really is no difference. So therefore, we're talking about a transition from lights, different levels of lights, different levels of migashem, different levels of materialization of lights, that eventually will become different levels of solidified vessels. I hope that makes sense. And therefore, you have a notion called orot mushlamim, orot enu mushlamim, lights which are completely fixed. That means they're the prime state, and you'll find something which is below prime state. That's called enu mitukanim. So as they're coming up from the Peh, since they're very premature, these lights, and remember, we have to understand that there's two perspectives over here. I don't want to get too complicated, but there's always two perspectives. When you look milimala lemata, and from milimata lemala. It depends if you're looking from up to downwards or from down to upwards, meaning like this. There's a perspective from Hashem's perspective and a perspective from our perspective. Okay? Now, when we're looking at our perspective, we're saying the lights are Eino Mushlam. Why are they Eino Mushlam? Because they're too high for us. They're too strong for us. So therefore, they have to become more Migashem in order for us Tachtonim, us the lower civilizations, the lower worlds, can benefit from these lights. They're too powerful. That's why they're called Einu Metukanim. But from the perspective of Hashem, they're Metukan. They don't need anything more. They're only Einu Metukan. They're only in a state of not totally at a prime state because of our failure. Our failure of not being mitukan ourselves, that we're not at our prime state, we have to take more inferior lights. And that's why it's coined as enu mitukan. That's a very important yesod over here. So as we said, these lights which are enu mitukan are coming from the Peh De'ak. זה מפני שכוונת המאציל הייתה לתת גילוי במקום זה לאביות הכלים. Because again, we said, the only difference between lights and vessels are the fact that vessels are material lights. And therefore, since the lights are at prime state means from the perspective of Hashem, and they're not megashem, they haven't become kelim, that's why we call them enu metukanim. Kedei lalbish achakal rod b'tocham. So you have to make a transition from light to vessel, in order that in the vessels there should be in order that light should have a place where to be, which is in the vessels. Hope that makes sense. Then you have a state where the tachtonim, which is us, the lower levels, can receive it. Because you can also look at the kelim as filters. Again, the light is too strong, and the way to receive light would be to be malbish the light in vessels, which creates the effect of filters, limiting the strength of the light, and therefore we can benefit from it. אומנם אם היו הבורא יוצאים ידי מיד בכל שלמותם, לא הייתה יכולים הכלים להתהוות, ולכן יצאו מתחילה בלתי מושלמים. That's why when the lights came out, they didn't come in their full power. We'll see what that means in a minute. Excuse me. But rather, they came out in minimal power. Okay, in order to create the effect of materialization, which will then create the effect of kelim. ואז הותרו לחזור ולעלות אל שורשם, להשתלם שם. והנה בעת חזרת האורות וסילוקם נגלית בחינת הכלים. So this process of them coming out from the Pidiak and coming back into the Pidiak would eventually create what's called the kelim. It's a process. So let's go now into the details of this process of coming out from the pit, and then tomorrow, B'ezrat Hashem, we'll go back, finishing the process, how it went back into the pit to create the final vessel. נפרש תחילת יציאת אורות פרק. Here, this is the way it came out. I'm going to read it out first, and then I'm going to show you actually a picture to demonstrate, to see exactly how it looks like. Not exactly, again, we're not megashim over here. These pictures that I'm going to show you are just, it's just a moshel. שכל מאור בשלמותו, יש בו מדרגות של אור פנימי, ואין נרן חי. אמנם עוד אלו דעקודים בצאתם לא יצאו אלו בבחינת האור, פחות שבהם נקרא נפש. Remember, in light we said there are different levels of light. So we say in light there's 5 levels, which is called nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. The lowest part of the light is called the nefesh. That's the weakest part of the light. As we said, the lights are coming out in a deficient way. They're coming out only bebechinat nefesh, the aspect of nefesh, which is the lowest, weakest part of the light. והנה, סדר יציאת 10 ספירות העקודים כך הייתה. תחילת יצתה ספירת מלכות. Okay, so it's very interesting that we're coming from the Pedeak. They're not coming out. We're talking about the 10 levels of the Pedeak, and we're talking about a case where they are coming out backwards. Usually, the 10 levels of light, which is 10 sfirot of the Olam Da'akudi would be Keter, Chochma, Bina, Da'at, Chesed, Kvar, Tiferet, Netzer, Yosod. Here it's come out the opposite. And we'll see why that is later on as well. So therefore, the malchut of these lights, which are coming out in the bechina of nefesh. Hope that makes sense. Okay? So the lights are coming out from the Pedeak. There's 10 levels of these light, which is called the 10 sfirot of the Akudim De'ak. Now we're talking about the lowest level, which is malchut. And we're talking about the lowest level of malchut, which is called the nefesh of the malchut. So in short, very, very weak lights is coming out. תחילה יצא ספירות מלכות, כאמור לא נתגלה בצאתה אלא במחד נפש בלבד, like I just explained, ואחר כך יצא יסוד. And then, slowly, then comes the next sphere of yesod. כאמור במחד נפש לבד עצמה. It's also coming in the level of nefesh. אלא שעל ידי יציאתו נתוספה הרע במלכות. Then, what happened? Malchut gets energized, the fact that Yesod's coming after Malchut, then the Malchut's light will increase from a level of Nefesh to Ruach. ותמו כי ברוח בא מן אבק. לכן בצאת יסוד מתחילה תתגלו במלכות מדרגה אחת של הרוח. We know that Ruach is associated with the Vak, which is Chesed Gvura Tiferet Nitzon Hod Yesod. Since Yesod really has a place in Ruach, it's connected to Ruach. Therefore, what is it's coming out is giving a chelik 1/6 of Ruach into Malchut. I know it's complicated. Hang on, we'll go over it and I'll show you a picture. Okay. לכן, סט יסוד מתחיל להתגלות במלכות, מדרגה אחת של הרוח, it's actually 1/6 of the רוח. אבל אין נשלמת בבחינת רוח, עד אחר כך שיצא כל אבק חגת נאי, שמבין כולם נשלמת בבחינת רוח במלכות. So really, Malchut needs to receive 5 parts of its life, of its light. Malchut needs nefesh, ruach, neshama, chai, yechida. Right now, Malchut comes out and receives 1/5 of that light, which is the nefesh. How is it going to get the rest? Because subsequently, as more light comes out from the Pedeak, right after Malchut comes Ruach. Ruach accompanies with Yesod. What accompanies after again, we'll repeat. Malchut comes out. After Malchut is Yesod. From Yesod is accompanied. From Yesod's company, the power of Ruach. That is attributed and associated with Malchut. It's given over to Malchut, I should say. And therefore, Malchut receives 1/6 of the Ruach of Yesod. And then we're going to continue the story. What comes after Yesod is Netzach. Netzach, now it's 2/6 of Ruach that will be given over to Malchut, and so on and so forth. And all of them, Netzach, Hod, Tiferet, Gvura, Chesed, all of them come out, all 6, the Vak, it's called the Vav Ketzavot, come out. And because when the Vav Ketzavot come out, which is completely the Ruach, which is in coordination with the Ruach, that's given over to Malchut. And all those Bechinas become still Nefesh. Okay? Now, after that comes the Bina, bebechinat nefesh le'atzma, bebechinat ruach leza, or bebechinat neshama le'malchut, and everything keeps on growing. Okay, now let me show you a picture before we get too advanced. So we're up to the bechina of Bina. So here's the picture that I drew. It's in my sefer called Otzot Chaim Mevuach on page Tzadi Hey. So this is, let me just coordinate this exactly. So here we're talking, imagine over here that this is the Pedeak, the mouth of Ak. Now, in the mouth of Ak, we're talking about different levels of mouth Ak. So let's start over here. All this will be Pedeak. So let's just forget about all these levels. We're just going to focus on this particular Pedeak. It's not 10th Pedeak, right? Really, it should be one level up to the other, right? So we're talking about this level first, and then we're going to talk about that level, but it's all the same. So the Pedeak comes out Malchut. What level of Malchut? Nefesh. Then Yesod will come out from the Pedeak, adding Ruach to Malchut. Then after that, the Netzach comes out, Hod, and then we're talking about Gvura. Then we're talking about Tiferet, Gvura, and then Chesed. So you see that all those bechinas of the Vak is Nefesh, and the Malchut will receive then a completion of Ruach. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Now, when we look back at the Pedeak, now we have to erase all that because we're not compounding this, but rather we're looking at one line at a time. That's all the Pedeak. These are frames. Okay? So therefore, then we're up to Bina. Bina comes out. Remember, always come out with the lowest light of Nefesh. And then the Vak all then becomes a Ruach. Okay? And the Malchut will become a Neshama. That means we're increasing the power of each one of them. And then Chochmah will come out also. It starts off with a very low light. Chochmah comes out with Nefesh. And then the Vak will be Ruach. And then you finally get then Bina is Ruach, Vak would be Neshama, and then Malchut would be Chaya, increasing the light. And then finally, the Pidak, what's coming out the last sphere of the Pidak, which is actually the first sphere, is Keter. Keter comes out because Nefesh. Chochma will become what? Not Nefesh, because it had its Nefesh beforehand. So from this what comes out Ruach. Bina would be Neshama. The Vak would be Chaya. And then Malchut would be finally Yechida. And this is how it would look one picture by another picture. Again, finally this would be called the Yitzia of the Pidak. This is where all the lights that come out from the Pidak. Okay? Like you said, there's two processes, and the reason why we're doing all this why Kadosh Baruch Hu is doing this in order to create Keli. So let's continue over here. So up to Chochma. It says, V'achkar yatzu Chochma b'bichinat nefesh le'atzma, b'bichinat ruach el bina, b'bichinat neshama el zah, b'bichinat chayil le'malchut. V'achar kach yatzu keter b'bichinat nefesh le'atzma, b'bichinat ruach le'chochma, b'bichinat neshama le'bina, b'bichinat chayil le'zah, b'bichinat yechida le'malchut. And that's completion of the picture I just showed you. Now, let's continue. Let's just finish off over here. וכיוון שהכתר הזה יצא אחרון לכל הצפירות העקודים, לא יצא אלא בבחינת נפש לבד, הרי שבכללות עולם העקודים לא יצא באמת אלא בדרגת נפש בלבד. And all those lights, really, even the יחידה of the malchut, it's all בכלל נפש. והנה, בכל ספירות עולם העקודים לא נשמע בכל חמישה אורותיה, Naran Chil Zulati Daga, the Malchut Belvad. And what do we say? Who got the most light was the Malchut. Malchut started with the Nefesh, and then it started with the Nesham Ruah, Neshama Chai. Naran Chil, finally Malchut received its complete package. Full strength of the Malchut came out. אבל שעה 9 ספירות, שעליה לא נשמע בצטר מפה דאג, ונשארו בחוסר תשלום כל אחת כפי מדרגתה. למען יצרו לעזוב ולעלות אלא מעציל תשלום שם, שעל ידי סילוקם של אורות תשלום, בחינת כמלים למטה. So why, at the end of the day, if we look back at this picture, we find that the only complete light was Malchut. Malchut received a succession from Nefesh all the way down. It received all its light, and it ended up with a Malchut of Yechida. Full power, but all the other lights, for example, the Vak only got up to their Chaya. Bina only got up to Neshama. Chochma only got Ruach. And Keter only got Nefesh. So they're missing quite a bit. Keter only got Nefesh. What about its Ruach, Neshama, Chai, Yechida? That's why it has to go back in. That's going to be the next year tomorrow when we speak about how the light has to go back in order to recomplete. Now, why is it going back and forth? Again, it's a process which is called Asiyat Kelim, in order to create this image, this process called materialization of the Keli, as we'll speak about tomorrow, B'ezrat Hashem.